which I think I teased a little bit earlier, Idaho's mining heritage. With the wrapping up of the legislature, which I'm so happy for, it has given us a chance to research other topics other than politics. This one, but Idaho's mining history is one of them. We'll be diving into how Idaho got the nickname of the Gem State and how you can experience it. We'll be exploring the history of Idaho's mining and how it has shaped the state and been part of it since its founding. We'll also be examining how mining is not dead in Idaho and how you can experience it for yourself. So, to start off with that, to kind of give some good context, because I even, growing up here, didn't know much of this, let's first go into kind of, I guess, the timeline there of events with mining history in Idaho.
So yeah, in 1860, mining began to be a significant activity in Idaho with the discovery of gold near Pierce in the northern part of the state. This discovery, which marked the beginning of Idaho's first major industry, mining, led to thousands of prospectors coming to the state. Just 2 years later, in 1862, gold was discovered again in the Boise Basin. This second discovery of gold led to one of the larger gold rushes in the Pacific Northwest, which I can understand. If you're coming up into the Boise area, then sure, that sounds like a great place to go to pan for gold. A year after that, in 1863, with the gold rush attracting thousands of prospectors to the region, it created towns like Placerville and Idaho City, which at the time was the largest city in the Northwest. All of this played a crucial role in the establishment of the Idaho Territories with the help of Abraham Lincoln. A decade or two later, in the late 1870s, silver and lead were discovered in the Owyhee district in the southern part of the state, which ended up fostering the famous city, Silver City. And then in the 80s, just a couple years later, silver was discovered in Coeur d'Alene area, which is now known as Silver Valley for a good reason. The valley became one of the world's largest producers of silver and led to the foundings of towns like Wallace, Burke, and Kellogg. Sadly, by the 80s and 90s, the Silver Valley became the site of intense labor conflicts, including strikes and violence between miners and mine owners. These conflicts were rooted in pay, workforce safety, and unionization. Not to mention, going into the mid-1900s, mining continued while gold mining declined, and Idaho's focus shifted to other materials such as silver, phosphate, lead, zinc, and a variety of semi-precious stones. Idaho became the largest producer of newly minted silver in the nation and the second largest phosphate producer.
Which, all that said, at its peak, Idaho documented over 8,000 mines and prospects. These mines varied significantly in size and output, focusing on a wide range of minerals, as we've learned. The main focus was first on minerals like gold and silver, but later on industrial minerals such as phosphate, garnet, and zinc. Thankfully, though, Idaho continues to be a significant player in the mining industry, focusing on silver, phosphate, and those other minerals. As a state, we're known for having very important minerals, except for oil, gas, and coal. Which, talking about those mines, those 8,000 mines, the biggest ones to kind of, if you want to go see them, some of them are actually still operating. In the southwest part of Idaho, there's the Delamar mine, which was an open pit silver and gold mine in the Owyhee County, which operated from 1977 to 1998. It was described as the first modern open pit silver mine. It was located about 1 mile from the ghost town of Delamar, which out of all the big mines, that was the only major one in the southwest, but over in the southeast, there was the Blackbird mine. Although now inactive, this mine was a significant source of cobalt, silver, and copper ore. It is part of Idaho's cobalt belt, which is considered a desirable stretch of ore for cobalt mining. And then there were also a lot of phosphate mines over there in the eastern part with large pit phosphate mines, including the Ballard mine, a former open pit one located in the phosphate mining district. This region is one of the largest sources of phosphate ore in the United States. And then in northern Idaho, where the bulk of these really big mines ended up being, you have the Sunshine Mine, located between the cities of Kellogg and Wallace, which has been one of the world's largest and most profitable silver mines. It's one of the largest mines in the Coeur d'Alene mining district, which, as was mentioned earlier, is one of the richest metal mining areas in the world. Then you have the Bunker Hill Mine, which we've talked about before, situated in the Coeur d'Alene mining district as well, which is known as one of America's largest lead-silver mines, where lead and silver are found mixed together. And the last one is the Lucky Friday Mine. This is a deep underground silver, lead, and zinc mine, also located in the Coeur d'Alene mining district. It is one of the top 7 silver mines in the world, celebrating its 75th anniversary in 2017, and was expected to produce 156.25 to 165.63 tons of silver in 2023.
That's a lot of silver.
It is.
Yeah. But talking about that amount of silver, that brings us full circle. Idaho has had a rich history of mining, and we're called the gem state for good reasons. As a state between 1860 and 1866, we produced 19% of all gold in the United States, that's a massive percentage. We also became one of the U.S.'s biggest producers of silver, and we continue to be. Not to mention the lead and zinc mining that we did in the 40s to help with the war effort. Also, coming into the present, we as a state are a huge producer of phosphate, cobalt, and soon lithium, which the latter two are desperately needed for lithium batteries and electric vehicles. Also, silver is a massive one in the electronics industry as well. Silver is used a lot in a lot of different things. So we've got a lot of stuff that we're digging up out of the earth that are needed in present day American economy.
Right. Yeah. Going through this, I knew Idaho had a mining history, and so I knew when reading this, I was going to find some cool facts about how much mining. But the crazy part for me in doing all this is realizing how much Idaho still does mining. With that said, we've talked about it. If you've listened to the midweek report of the show long enough, there's different mines that have tried to come online, and we'll just say regulatory bodies have not been so friendly to them. But overall, especially with the silver side of things, Idaho has still been very active in that regard. Which, I mean, with all this info and that overview kind of given of stuff that's gone on with Idaho's history and what's currently going on with mining, I think one of the biggest takeaways you can take is we can still do stuff. I know there's a certain amount of, especially as conservatives, of doom and gloom that, manufacturing jobs are going overseas and that we can't do stuff. And it's just, 100% the fall of Rome, doom and gloom. It's apocalyptic, right? But I think a good example here, especially even with the regulatory world we live in, we can still do mining in America, and especially here in Idaho with the silver mines, upwards of like 165 tons of silver estimated in 2023 from one mine up in Coeur d'Alene. That should be something that's really, really encouraging. And it's also encouraging to know that we have those resources here.
Well, we have the resources. We also have the historical knowledge, and we have the historical ability to produce those things. So it's not even just that the material is here. It's that we have the know-how, we have the ability to get it out, and we have the ability to do it in an as environmentally friendly as you can be with this sort of thing. And we have a lot of people who are willing to do that work, which is great. That bolsters the economy, Idaho's economy, but it also strengthens the U.S. economy in an amazing way, which is good. Right.
And I know that I gave this argument to a couple people during COVID, but it works well here. Our mining practices in the past may have not been as nice to the environment. But on the flip side, if we can put a man on the moon and furthest stretches of our solar system, I feel like, especially in any country on Earth, in America, we should be able to find a way to extract these resources and still have a minimal impact on the surrounding geology. Now, that doesn't mean you might, hollow out a mountain, but I think the thing that we're really caring about is that the rocks don't have feelings. We're trying to be really good stewards of, is the groundwater being affected by the refinement of these ores? Are the deer and different stuff being taken care of and they're not, irreparably being damaged or something? I feel like we can totally do that. We shouldn't just run away and say, mines are bad, and also over-regulating them to the extent that they can't do their job. We want to incentivize them, but we don't want to push them away, because if we can foster more of that to happen in Idaho and America abroad, it helps us as an independence of a state, right? If you want a state to be able to stand on its own 2 feet and say, we want this and we don't want that to the federal government, independent of who's in power, if it's a liberal or a conservative, that state needs to have a certain level of independence. And one of those key elements to doing that is its economy. Texas, I know, has done really great strides in trying to do that. Sometimes it backfires like their power grid, but you have to break a couple eggs to make an omelet there. But that's the main thing you have to do. A lot of Idaho's budget right now, if I remember correctly, it's like 40% of our total budget comes from the federal government. And if we want to find a way to release ourselves from that dependence, mining, a lot of Idaho's budget right now, if I remember correctly, it's like 40% of our total budget comes from the federal government. And if we want to find a way to release ourselves from that dependence, mining is something that we already have in our history. There's already the resources there that Idaho can invest in and grow, and can be something that not only that, but can help the rest of the nation as a whole, not just Idaho. Because if the individual states in the union are strong, then the whole union is stronger because of it.
So I was having an interesting conversation with my brother-in-law a week ago. We went to see Dune Part 2, which fantastic movie.
Oh,
if you've not seen it yet, you've got to see it. And you've got to see it in theaters. It's a spectacle like no other.
Right.
Anyway, so coming out of that movie, we were talking, and one of the movies that's coming out recently is Civil War, which is Hollywood's depiction of what civil war in the United States could look like, which I kind of want to watch just to see what Hollywood thinks it would look like.
It sounds interesting.
It sounds interesting, but the question that was brought up, which states could actually secede? And, even getting outside of like the geopolitical realm, just thinking economically, what states even could secede from the Union? Texas would be one that could. You talked about the issues with their power grid. One of those issues, I think, is they agreed with Germany that we need to do away with nuclear power and coal and anything else and go fully with renewables. And so Texas is very reliant on solar and wind. And that's one of the issues we've seen with their grid the last couple winters is they have too much of that non-reliable energy and they don't have enough of the reliable anymore.
I know the main crux with that, I don't know if you heard about this, but from my end on that, when I commented on it, is that most other states in the union, they actually are hooked up to a national power grid. And so if one state has issues, another state can help it out. And Texas, in the interest of being independent, because welcome to Texas, they weren't hooked up to outside power grids. Right. And so when their systems failed, they became an issue of, well, we can't.
We can't import power.
We can't because we're not structured to do that right now.
Which is sad because, again, those issues all just kind of build on each other. If you're trying to be independent, but also you don't have enough redundancy, that's not good. Also, if Texas were hooked up and were able to create excess power, then they could sell it to the grid. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's one of the issues that Texas has. We here have not necessarily the power issue. We kind of have an economy issue though. And, bringing it back to home, one of the things that my wife and I talk about, and this is a thing that every household talks about because you need to, is, okay, how do you make ends meet? You have two options and only two options. You can either increase the amount of money that you bring in, or you decrease the amount of money that goes out, your expenditures. Those are the only things you can do. There's no other lines on the balance sheet. There's what comes in and there's what goes out. If that number at the end isn't positive, well, then you're in trouble. And right now, our number isn't positive. We bring in a lot of federal money. So if we wanted to be independent, if we wanted, like you said, to be able to wave that flag and say, no, we're going to do things the way that we know is right, and we don't have to take your federal money, then we have to do one of two things. We either decrease our expenditures or increase our income.
Right.
Or you do a combination of both. And mining is just one of those, it's for Idaho, it's low hanging fruit. It's, well, of course you mine stuff.
It's right there.
Yeah. Go get it.
Right. And something kind of similar on that idea of, income in, income out. Right. If your culture, or the main way that you're populous, we'll put it that way, is generating money is from outside entities other than those in its geographic area of its culture. So I used a lot of big words there because that's just what came to mind. But basically,
remote work.
Yeah, remote work, that you say Facebook is hiring a bunch of jobs in CUNA, right? They're bringing that data center in. But is Facebook really an Idaho company that has an Idaho culture and wants to uphold Idaho values? No, it's not. And so you would really like for your populace to work for a bunch of companies, even if they're in other states that are Idaho-based with those Idaho ideals. And mining is one of those things that is very locally based. And something that this comes all into the other discussion about logging, and I want to do a segment on that as well, but the mining was the first one that came to mind, is that there are so many towns. Idaho used to have way, way more rural towns in the height of our mining days, about 30 to 50 more small towns in Idaho. They were able to live rural and enjoy the fruits of being in some of our beautiful mountains, and mining afforded people to have that, an honest living, and also supporting their state and country. But with environmental groups getting a little bit uppity, which, there again, I will grant that there were some areas where we did our mining which wasn't great, but welcome to the 21st century. There's got to be some improvements we could do and also make it still profitable. By bringing this mining back and growing it and encouraging it is only going to help those rural towns to grow and stay alive and to stay vibrant. Equally with logging, this argument works with both of those so that the culture is still here in Idaho, that an Idaho mining company is supporting Idaho interests with Idaho workers rather than, there's a bunch of people that live in Wallace and we saw the population go up in Wallace, but the vast majority of those growth of people there was because of the prevalence of remote work, which is fine. It's great. I got nothing.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing, but that means a lot of those people, their paycheck, which is the most influencing factor on them, is not tied to the culture here in Idaho. It's tied to a culture in Silicon Valley or in California or Seattle or Oregon or something, rather than the culture that they're living in.
Well, and not only the culture, because that is one side of the coin, and it's a big side, so I'm glad you're talking about it. The other side of it, though, is economic. Like, yes, they're bringing in a paycheck from Facebook. Facebook is building a plant down in Kuna, and that's good. Like, that's money coming into our state. But Facebook is not based in Kuna. Right. So the wealth that is generated from that plant is leaving our state. It's going to, where's Facebook? Is Facebook Seattle or Portland? I don't know. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. The fact is, it's not in Idaho. It's going somewhere else. So yes, paychecks are coming here. And so money is coming in from that place in Kuna. A lot of money. It's going to be a good thing. But the wealth. And so I think that's two sides of the coin that we talk about when we talk about economics. Is we talk about our paycheck. Yes, the income, that's an important thing. But also wealth is the other side of income. It's what do you do with the income that you get? And if you are the owner of a business, well, you have the power to create wealth and you have the power to decide what to do with that wealth.
Right.
And we've seen so many people in American history recently do things that aren't great with that wealth. They're running things into the ground. They're doing things culturally that we in Idaho disagree with. So again, if we're looking to be independent as a state, we need our balance sheet to make sense. But then also we need industries here that create wealth, and through that wealth we can continue our cultural, I don't know, relevance or our cultural
and
we can
civil authority and independence.
Yeah. Because it's one thing to have a balanced sheet. It's another thing to also have wealth.
Which is why if you're sitting there and you're realizing, wait a second, why is it always California in the news making leftist policies? Well, because these states have very robust state economies that they can do these things and stand up to the federal government and stuff. If you're wondering, why don't you hear much about, New Mexico or Arizona or Kansas or Dakota?
You don't hear much about New Mexico because it's corrupt as corrupt can get, but that's a different story.
Yes, different story for a different time. But you might wonder, why we're a union. We have a ton of other states. Why aren't you hearing this more often? Well, I would argue, not looking into those, but I would suspect a lot of those states, just like us, have a lot more reliance on those federal tax dollars, and thus they're a little bit more quiet. And that brings me kind of to the last point here of the analysis before we kind of get to an application about all of this for you, is that regularly as conservatives that we regularly hear on a national scale that we need to have America first, right? It's like the Trump make America great again. That's Trump's type of thing, right? And not globalism. We want nationalism. And I don't have an issue with it. I get it. And I think that's a good direction to move away from globalism more towards our interests first. And then obviously you want to take care of other people. But if you can't take care of yourself and keep your house in order, how are you going to take care of other people's houses? But I think I would almost press, especially with this example, that we hear about that all the time. But I would encourage you, listener, think of it even more, not nationalism, but statehood. Being, for lack of a better word, I think it might be the word I'm looking for, but status, that you have national pride, but you also have state pride. That's something that if you look back, especially leading up to the Civil War and other parts in American history, that was an understood cornerstone of American civil society, is that, we are Americans, but also I'm an Idahoan. And in modern days, we've gotten, we're Americans, and the state part is like my denomination, for lack of a better word, to use kind of a Christian side of things. And that works to a point, but especially in this, I think it would be more encouraging and better for the Union overall if we more focused on, okay, I am an American. I have a certain allegiance that we all as a Union have shared values in the Constitution that we all agree on. But also, I'm an Idahoan, and I care very much about Idaho sometimes more than I do the rest of the nation in the interest of my local community.
Well, I think it stems from where value comes from in your life. And if value comes from the state, then you're going to be first and foremost a statist. Or if it comes from the federal government, then you're going to be a federal governmentist, I guess.
Yeah.
But the founding fathers had a different set of ideals that they lived by than the vast majority of people today. They had personal responsibility. And so first and foremost was, how do I govern myself? And so that's where I think a lot of their ideas came from, was from self-governance. First, I govern myself. Then I govern my family. Then I govern my city. Then my county. Then my state. Then my country. And it was like an inside-out governance. And at this point, I would say the U.S. majority, they flipped that around and they say, no, first governance comes from the outside. And then it comes more local, and then more local, and then more local. And finally, the last governance that happens, the very last one, is myself. I rely on their laws. I rely on their structures. I rely on everyone else to tell me what to do, until finally I don't have any decisions left to make because they're all made for me. So what do? Well, I just do what I'm supposed to. And
right.
that's a completely backwards and 180-degree different take. It's an inverted worldview from, I think, what our founding fathers had, and from what makes a successful home, a successful local community, a successful state, and a successful federal government, is that first we look locally. We look at our own lives first.
Right. And here again, for the person out there, I have no doubt, maybe I'm stirring the pot a little bit, but this also comes from a biblical principle that's taught in God's word, which hate it or like it, that is one of the founding books that influenced a lot of Western culture and what built America. And this idea of, even that language, I think that's the exact language it's using in God's word, is that if you can't have your own house in order, why should you try to go do someone else? Take the log out of your own eye before you take the speck out of your brother's. And if we believe that God's word is inspired by God and correct, and it's a manual for life, then how much more should we then apply that to the rest of society and the way we live and how it will function both in politics and different matters? Now, that moving into like our application, I wanted to give you guys some resources to go experience and see the stuff that we've talked about, because obviously this is stuff that's happened in Idaho. If you're up north or even in the southern part of the state, there's a lot of cool things you can go see and do. You can do different hiking trails, to go rock hounding, different exhibits and stuff. For here down in the valley, one of the main places you can go to kind of learn about that history and experience it in like a museum setting, if you don't want to go too rural, is the Idaho Museum of Mining and Geology in Boise. They have different tours you can do and presentations they have there. So that's another really great one. But then if you're up north, there is the Mining Heritage exhibit in Wallace. That one's also a really great one. They have some tours. I think they have some mines and different things the kids can do there. Then if you're more like you want to go out and do specific things or tours and actually see the physical places with yourself, there's a lot of tours up north because most of those mines up there in Silver Valley are there. There's the Sierra Silver Mine in Wallace. There's also the Crystal Gold Mine in Kellogg that you can go to. And then the last one, if you want to get your hands as dirty as possible, literally, there's some different areas you could go around the state to go rock hounding or do kind of your own mining or panning. In the Snake River area, which there are several that you can pan for gold. I know there is the Eagle City Park in Keystone, Idaho. That one, I think, has a little bit of a charge for it. Plus, if you want to go all out, there's the Idaho State Gem, the Star Garnet, which is only really found here in Idaho or India. But you can go, the best way area for that, besides, maybe private claims or whatever else, is the Emerald Creek Garnet area, which is near St. Mary's. It is a U.S. Forest Service site located about an hour drive south of the town of Harrison. It is the only public digging site in the state. Granted, I think there's some places here in the valley that sell them if you don't want to go do that, but obviously you're probably wanting to go do it for yourself. The site is open from the Friday before Memorial Day through Labor Day each year. Permits are required and can be reserved online 90 days in advance at the recreational.gov. We'll have a link below for that. Visitors can dig in designated areas to collect garnets. The Forest Service provides a stockpile of garnet-bearing gravel and slough boxes to search for the gems. The facility is there for you with family or kids trying to understand, how big of a commitment it is. They have like picnic tables, toilets. There's also parking. Granted, it's about a half-mile hike from the parking area to the slough boxes where they have there, and there's no drinking water, so just make sure to take that with you. Plus, if you're not going specifically for star garnets, I also know there's a lot of different places you can go over in the Owyhees to do some different rock hounding. You can go look that up. I didn't specifically search that. And I think there are some petrified wood stuff over in and around like CJ Strike in that area and that valley. So those are also some really great resources if you want to go do your own little mining and see part of Idaho's geology.